I'm Leah Brooks, 28 years old, and I was standing alone in my bridal suite when I got the text. I can't make it today. I'm sorry. My father, the man who taught me to ride a bike and praised my first watercolor painting, chose not to walk me down the aisle on my wedding day. The beautiful white dress suddenly felt heavy on my shoulders. My sister Caitlin had finally succeeded in her lifelong mission, tearing apart what remained of our family. If you're watching this and have ever felt betrayed by someone who was supposed to love you, I understand. Before I share the rest of my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and stay with me, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about family. Growing up in Portland with my parents Frank and Diana Brooks seemed idyllic from the outside. Our blue two-story house with its wraparound porch was the setting for what should have been a happy childhood. My father worked as an architectural photographer, while my mother taught second grade at the local elementary school. My sister Caitlin arrived first, and I followed 3 years later. In my earliest memories, Caitlin seemed like the perfect big sister. She would hold my hand crossing the street and showed me how to tie my shoes with patient demonstrations. I have faded photographs of us building sandcastles at Cannon Beach, her teaching me to make the perfect moat around our creation. Those days, her smile seemed genuine when the camera captured us together. I was always the artistic one, constantly covered in paint or clay, creating something new. My bedroom walls were plastered with drawings and watercolors, each one proudly displayed after my father helped me hang them. I was sensitive, often crying during sad movies or when finding injured birds in our backyard. More than anything, I wanted everyone to be happy, especially my family. Caitlin was different, structured, organized, and fiercely competitive. Her room was immaculate, her backpack always perfectly packed the night before school. She brought home straight A's from her first report card, setting a pattern she maintained throughout her academic career. While I got lost in creating, she got lost in achieving, collecting accolades and certificates that our mother proudly displayed on the refrigerator. The first real sign that something was wrong came when I was 8. My art teacher entered one of my watercolor paintings in a local children's competition, and to everyone's surprise, especially mine, I won first place. The local newspaper sent a photographer to our house, and there was a small write-up about the young artistic prodigy. I remember the photographer positioning me in our backyard, holding my painting while my family stood proudly behind me. Or at least, that's what it looked like in the photo. What the camera didn't capture was Caitlin's whispered "it's just a stupid kids contest" when the photographer left, or how she accidentally spilled orange juice on my painting the next morning. My mother scolded her lightly, but Caitlin's tears and insistence that it was just a mistake quickly turned the sympathy in her direction. "You can make another one, Leah," my mother said, dabbing at the ruined paper. "Don't make such a fuss about it." My father tried to mediate, taking me to the art supply store to replace my materials, but even at 8, I recognized the pattern forming. Caitlin's accomplishments were celebrated, mine were diminished, especially if they outshone hers. As we grew older, Caitlin's methods became more sophisticated. In 6th grade, I mentioned an idea for our school's recycling program at dinner. 2 weeks later, Caitlin presented the same concept to her environmental club and received recognition from the principal. When I protested that it was my idea, my parents gently suggested I was confused about the timeline. "You probably heard Caitlin talking about it and mixed things up in your mind," my mother said, patting my hand. "You've always had such an active imagination, sweetie." By middle school, Caitlin had mastered the art of isolating me from potential friends. When Jessica Fisher invited me to her birthday party in 7th grade, Caitlin, then a sophomore, casually mentioned to Jessica's older brother that I had made fun of their family behind their backs. The invitation was rescinded with no explanation. It took months before Jessica would even speak to me again, and by then, the damage was done. Throughout all of this, my father remained my sanctuary. Frank Brooks was a quiet man who expressed love through actions rather than words. He taught me to use his camera when I was 10, patiently explaining aperture and shutter speed as we took photos in the park near our house. We would spend Sunday afternoons in his darkroom, watching images emerge like magic in the chemical baths. During these private moments, he would sometimes say, "You see the world differently, Leah. That's a gift." My mother Diana, though loving in her way, never quite understood me. She gravitated toward Caitlin's achievements, the measurable successes that could be quantified on report cards and trophies. My creative pursuits seemed frivolous to her, a phase she expected me to outgrow. "Art is a wonderful hobby," she would say, "but you need something practical to fall back on." By the time I reached high school, the dynamic was firmly established. Caitlin was student body president, valedictorian, and headed for pre-med studies. I was the artsy kid who decorated the sets for school plays and won contests that no one in my family except my father seemed to value. The summer before my junior year, Caitlin came home from college for a weekend and found my father and me looking through a portfolio I was preparing for art school applications. "You're really encouraging this?" she asked my father, gesturing toward my work. "You know there's no future in it, right?" My father looked up, surprised. "There's every future in doing what you love." Caitlin rolled her eyes. "Sure, if you want to live in mom and dad's basement forever." It was a small moment, but it crystallized everything. Caitlin didn't just want to succeed, she needed me to fail. When the acceptance letter from California Institute of the Arts arrived with a substantial scholarship offer, I felt a mixture of elation and relief. Cal Arts represented everything I'd worked toward, a prestigious program where I could develop my skills surrounded by like-minded artists. But more than that, it offered escape from the suffocating dynamic at home. The day I left for college was emotionally charged. My father helped load my beaten-up Honda Civic with art supplies, clothes, and a few treasured possessions. As he closed the trunk, he pressed a small package into my hands. "Open it when you get there," he said, his voice thick with emotion. My mother's goodbye was perfunctory, a quick hug and reminders about calling home regularly and making good choices. Caitlin didn't even come downstairs, claiming a migraine kept her in bed. I later learned she'd gone shopping with friends that same afternoon. The 8-hour drive to Valencia gave me plenty of time to think about what lay ahead. By the time I arrived at my dorm room, exhaustion competed with exhilaration. After meeting my roommate, a dancer from Seattle named Amber, I finally opened my father's gift, a professional-grade camera with a note that read, "To capturing new perspectives. Love, Dad." That first semester was transformative. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who didn't see my creativity as a liability but as my greatest strength. My professors pushed me to expand my technical skills while encouraging the emotional depth that had always infused my work. I made genuine friends who appreciated me for exactly who I was. Jessica Martin, a fellow visual arts student with a boisterous laugh and unflinching honesty, became my closest friend. Tyler Chen, a film student who often collaborated with me on projects, became another cornerstone of my new support system. With them, I never had to worry about hidden agendas or backhanded compliments. Our friendships were refreshingly straightforward. My first visit home for Thanksgiving revealed how quickly things had changed. While I bubbled over with stories about projects and new techniques I was learning, my mother seemed distracted, frequently steering the conversation back to Caitlin's accomplishments in her pre-med program. "Did I mention Caitlin's professor recommended her for a research position?" she asked, interrupting my story about a gallery showing that had included one of my pieces. My father tried to balance the attention, asking thoughtful questions about my work, but the underlying current was clear: my experiences were secondary. The breaking point came after dinner when I brought out my portfolio to show my father some recent pieces. As I carefully laid them on the dining room table, Caitlin approached with a glass of red wine. "Oh, these are actually pretty good," she said, leaning over my carefully created works. As she gestured with the glass, her arm accidentally knocked against mine, sending the wine splashing across 3 of my best pieces. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she gasped, grabbing napkins that only smeared the damage further. "It was an accident." I watched months of work dissolve in burgundy stains, knowing with absolute certainty it had been deliberate. When I looked up at my sister, I caught the smallest smile before her face resumed its mask of concern. It's fine, I said quietly, pulling the sodden papers away from her helpful blotting. I'll just make copies at school. They were just copies anyway, right? My mother chimed in, already cleaning up the spilled wine on the table. No real harm done. My father watched the scene with a furrowed brow but said nothing. That night, I overheard Caitlin talking to my mother in the kitchen. I'm worried about Leah, she was saying. Her roommate called me last week. Apparently, Leah's been partying pretty hard, missing classes sometimes. I didn't want to bring it up in front of Dad. I stood frozen in the hallway, the lie so outrageous I could barely process it. I had never missed a class, maintained a perfect GPA, and rarely went to parties. And Caitlin had never spoken to Amber, she didn't even have her contact information. The next morning, my mother was cold toward me, making pointed comments about focusing on education rather than socializing. When I tried to confront Caitlin privately, she feigned innocence. I'm just concerned about you, she said with wide, earnest eyes. College can be such a vulnerable time. When I insisted her concern was based on lies, her facade dropped momentarily. They'll always choose me over you, she whispered. Remember that. I returned to CalArts with a heavy heart but renewed determination. Over the next few years, I limited my visits home to major holidays and kept conversations superficial when there. My father increasingly became the only family member I had real communication with, though even those conversations grew strained. Caitlin's poison had begun to work on him too. Comments like, Dad, remember when Leah used to call you every Sunday? I guess she's too busy now had their intended effect. Never mind that I'd tried calling multiple Sundays when no one answered. By graduation, I had made a decision, I would build my life in California. I had secured a position at a graphic design firm in Los Angeles that would provide steady income while I developed my fine art portfolio. When I announced my plans to stay on the West Coast, my mother seemed resigned, my father disappointed but understanding. Caitlin simply smiled. I always knew you'd end up far away from family, she said, somehow making it sound like an indictment of my character rather than the result of hers. 3 years after graduation, my career had taken a promising turn. My commercial work funded my true passion projects, and I had begun to make a name for myself in LA's competitive art scene. On a warm Friday evening in May, the Whitney Gallery in Santa Monica was hosting an opening that featured 3 of my mixed media pieces. The space buzzed with conversation as art lovers moved from piece to piece, glasses of champagne in hand. I was explaining my technique to an interested couple when I noticed him, tall with warm brown eyes, studying my largest piece with genuine curiosity. Unlike many gallery attendees who glanced briefly before moving on, he stood there for nearly 10 minutes, absorbing every detail. When the couple moved on, he approached me. You're the artist, aren't you? I can tell by how nervous you look, he said with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. I'm Ryan Matthews. Your work is extraordinary. There was something immediately disarming about Ryan. As we talked, I learned he was a software engineer who had wandered into the gallery after dinner nearby. Art wasn't his profession, but his enthusiasm was genuine and his questions thoughtful. When the gallery began to close, he asked if I'd like to continue our conversation over coffee. That first coffee date stretched into 3 hours of conversation that ranged from creative processes to family dynamics to our shared love of 1970s cinema. Ryan spoke candidly about his close-knit family in San Diego, parents who had been married for 35 years and a younger brother studying abroad in Japan. When I cautiously shared some of my own family history, his response lacked the awkward sympathy or quick subject changes I'd become accustomed to. Family should build you up, not tear you down, he said simply. I'm sorry yours didn't know how to appreciate you. Over the next few months, Ryan became my closest confidant and biggest supporter. He showed up to every gallery showing, often bringing friends from work to increase attendance. He listened to my creative frustrations and celebrated my successes, no matter how small. For my birthday, he tracked down a first-edition book by my favorite photographer that I'd mentioned once in passing. Ryan's stable presence in my life helped heal wounds I hadn't fully acknowledged. His family welcomed me with an ease that felt foreign. Sunday dinners at his parents' home involved boisterous conversation where everyone's voice was heard and valued equally. His mother Karen asked thoughtful questions about my art. His father Kenneth shared his own amateur photography with shy pride. After 2 years together, during a weekend trip to Catalina Island, Ryan proposed at sunset on a secluded beach. The ring was his grandmother's, reset with stones that matched the colors in my first painting that he'd seen at the gallery. "You've shown me how to see the world through artist's eyes," he said, kneeling in the sand. "I want to build a life where we both keep growing, together." Through happy tears, I said yes. That night in our hotel room, as we discussed calling our families with the news, I felt the familiar knot of anxiety about involving my family in this joy. "We should tell your parents first," I suggested. "They'll be genuinely happy for us." Ryan squeezed my hand. "And then we'll call yours. Whatever their reaction, it doesn't change us." The call to my parents went as expected. My father expressed what seemed like sincere happiness, though I detected a note of sadness, perhaps at how distant we'd become. My mother's congratulations were polite but reserved, immediately focusing on practical questions about dates and venues. When I mentioned we were thinking of a June wedding the following year, she immediately said, "I'll have to check with Caitlin. She might have conferences around then." The mention of my sister dampened my spirits slightly. I hadn't spoken directly to Caitlin in nearly 6 months, though she occasionally sent passive-aggressive text messages, "Just checking in since you never call Mom and Dad anymore." I took a deep breath and asked my mother to put the call on speaker so I could tell Caitlin too. There was a rustling, and then my sister's voice came through, artificially bright. "A wedding? How exciting! Send me a picture of the ring." I complied, texting a photo while maintaining the call. "Oh," she said after receiving it. "It's unique. Vintage?" "It was Ryan's grandmother's," I explained, trying to keep my voice neutral. "How sweet. Will you be having a big wedding? Who's planning it? Have you thought about colors? June can be tricky for venues, you know." The rapid-fire questions continued, each one subtly undermining rather than celebrating. By the end of the call, my excitement had dimmed considerably. "She's already trying to take over," I said to Ryan afterward. "Or worse, sabotage it somehow." "This is our day," Ryan reminded me. "We control who's involved and how much influence they have." At Christmas, we made the trip to Portland to introduce Ryan to my family in person. The visit was a strange mixture of tension and forced pleasantries. My father warmed to Ryan quickly, the two of them bonding over a shared interest in vintage cars. My mother was cordially distant, while Caitlin performed the role of enthusiastic sister so convincingly I almost believed it myself. It was only when she cornered Ryan alone in the kitchen that her true colors showed. I walked in to find her standing uncomfortably close to him. "You should know what you're getting into with Leah," she was saying in a low voice. "She's always been the fragile one in the family. Emotionally unpredictable, if you know what I mean." Ryan's response was measured but firm. "Actually, one of the things I love most about Leah is her emotional intelligence and stability. It must have been challenging growing up with such different perspectives on the world." Caitlin's mask slipped momentarily before she recovered with a tight laugh. "Oh, she's told you her version of things, I see." The drive back to our hotel that night was quiet until Ryan broke the silence. "I understand now," he said. "Everything you've told me about your sister, I thought maybe time had colored your perception, but if anything, you've been generous in your descriptions." After that visit, we returned to California with renewed determination to create our own happiness. We set a date, June 15th, and booked a beautiful venue in wine country. We envisioned an intimate ceremony with around 70 guests, focusing on quality time with people who truly supported our relationship. When I called my father to officially ask him to walk me down the aisle, his emotional "I would be honored" brought tears to my eyes. For a moment, I felt the father-daughter connection that had been my anchor throughout childhood. Hope blossomed that maybe, just maybe, my wedding could begin healing the fractures in my family. The January after our engagement, wedding planning began in earnest. Our vision was clear, a celebration that reflected our values and personalities rather than following rigid traditions. We found the perfect venue, a restored barn on a vineyard in Sonoma County, and secured a date in mid-June when the California weather would be ideal. With 8 months until the wedding, I created a detailed timeline for decisions and deposits. Jessica eagerly accepted my invitation to be maid of honor, while Ryan chose his brother as best man. Everything was falling into place until an unexpected phone call from Caitlin. "I heard you've started planning," she said, her voice brimming with forced enthusiasm. "I want to help. You know I've always been the organized one in the family." The offer caught me off guard. In the decade since I'd left for college, Caitlin had never shown genuine interest in my life. Yet something in me, perhaps that 8-year-old still seeking her big sister's approval, wanted to believe this could be a turning point. "That's really nice of you," I said cautiously. "Maybe you could help with researching florists in the Portland area for the rehearsal dinner?" "I can do so much more than that," Caitlin insisted. "I could be your coordinator. I planned Melissa Baker's entire wedding last year, and everyone said it was perfect." Against my better judgment and Ryan's subtle warnings, I agreed to let Caitlin help with specific, contained tasks. It seemed easier than refusing and dealing with the family fallout. I created a shared document with clearly defined responsibilities. Caitlin would research local vendors, help address invitations, and coordinate with our mother on family-related details. The problems began almost immediately. Vendors I'd never contacted called to confirm details Caitlin had apparently discussed with them, details that contradicted our actual plans. When I confronted her, she claimed she was just exploring options on my behalf. "I found a DJ who's much better than the one you chose," she explained. "And he's willing to give us a family discount." "We've already put a deposit down on our DJ," I reminded her. "And we specifically wanted someone with experience in our venue." "Well, you could get that deposit back if you explained the situation. I thought you'd appreciate me saving you money." This pattern repeated with florists, caterers, and even the photographer. Each time, Caitlin had an explanation that positioned her as helpful while implying I was being difficult or ungrateful. 3 months into planning, I discovered several invitation addresses had been incorrectly entered into the spreadsheet Caitlin had offered to manage. Ryan's aunt and uncle, who lived in Seattle, somehow had their address changed to a non-existent location in Sacramento. His college roommate's invitation was addressed to the correct street but the wrong city entirely. When I sorted through the spreadsheet carefully, I found over a dozen similar mistakes, all affecting Ryan's side of the guest list. Had I not caught them, many key people in his life would never have received invitations. "These are all just typos," Caitlin insisted when I called her. I was entering data late at night after my shift at the hospital. "I'm trying to help you while maintaining my own demanding career, you know." The finishing touch came when I received a call from my mother, concerned about the provocative design of our invitations. "Aunt Catherine was quite shocked when she opened it," my mother said disapprovingly. "Really, Leah, a wedding invitation isn't the place for your artistic expression." Confused, I asked her to send me a photo of the invitation. What I saw was nothing like the elegant, letterpress design we had chosen. Instead, it featured a stock photo of a couple in a questionable embrace with poorly formatted text overlaid. "Mom, that's not our invitation," I explained, forwarding her a picture of the actual design. "I don't know where that came from, but it's not what we sent out." A day later, Caitlin called, laughing about the mix-up. "I may have accidentally attached the wrong image file when I was helping Mom show Aunt Catherine your invitation design online," she explained. "It was just a sample I found when researching ideas for you." "Isn't it hilarious that Mom thought you'd choose something so tacky?" The incidents continued to escalate. Deposits went missing, requiring us to pay twice. Details we'd finalized mysteriously changed in communications with vendors. Family members called to decline their invitations because they'd heard the wedding had been postponed. After a particularly stressful week of damage control, Jessica intervened. "This isn't just incompetence," she said firmly during an emergency lunch meeting. Leah, your sister is deliberately sabotaging your wedding. You need to cut her out of the process entirely. Deep down, I knew Jessica was right. That evening, I called Caitlin and politely but firmly removed her from all wedding responsibilities. The conversation went exactly as expected. I've been killing myself trying to help you, she cried, voice trembling with manufactured hurt. This is the thanks I get? Making me look bad in front of the family? I appreciate your intentions, I said, sticking to the script Jessica and I had prepared. But Ryan and I want to handle things ourselves from here on out. The following day, my mother called, clearly distressed. Caitlin is absolutely devastated, she began without preamble. She's put her heart and soul into helping with your wedding, and you've thrown it back in her face. Mom, there have been too many mistakes. Mistakes happen, Leah. She's been working 60-hour weeks at the hospital and still making time for your wedding. You've always been so sensitive about everything. Not everyone is a perfectionist about centerpieces and font choices. The conversation deteriorated from there, ending with my mother suggesting I had always been jealous of Caitlin's organizational abilities. In the aftermath, Jessica stepped up as the true maid of honor I needed. She helped correct the damage Caitlin had caused, contacting vendors to confirm details and sending follow-up messages to guests who might have received misinformation. By early May, just 6 weeks before the wedding, we had recovered from most of Caitlin's help. The invitations had been correctly sent, vendors confirmed, and deposits properly processed. I began to relax, hoping the worst was behind us. Then came the call from my cousin Amy. I'm confused about the dates, she said. I just got an email from Caitlin about a family reunion on June 15th at your parents' house, but that's your wedding day, right? My blood ran cold. What family reunion? She said it's been planned for months. Something about celebrating your grandfather's 80th birthday? But Grandpa's birthday is in September. After thanking Amy and ending the call, I sat in stunned silence, the pieces falling into place. This wasn't just sabotage, this was Caitlin's nuclear option. The revelation about Caitlin's family reunion sent me into a panic spiral. With trembling hands, I called my father, hoping against hope that this was another misunderstanding. Dad, is there a family event planned at your house for June 15th? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The telling pause before he answered confirmed my fears. Well, yes, he finally said. Caitlin has organized a family gathering. Your mother's cousins from Michigan are coming in, and your grandfather is looking forward to seeing everyone. We assumed you and Ryan would stop by after your wedding festivities. Dad, it's an 8-hour drive from our venue to Portland, I explained, feeling my chest tighten. And the reception won't end until late evening. There's no way we could stop by. Another uncomfortable pause. I see, he said. That does complicate things. Did Caitlin tell you she was planning this for my wedding day? I pressed. She mentioned your date might change, he admitted. Something about venue issues. She said you were still figuring things out but that family should reserve the weekend either way. The calculated deception took my breath away. Caitlin hadn't just planned a competing event, she had systematically lied to ensure maximum conflict. Dad, our wedding date has never changed. The venue was booked last October. The invitations went out months ago. Oh. His discomfort was palpable even through the phone. I'm not sure what to say, Leah. Will you still walk me down the aisle? I asked directly, my voice small. His hesitation was like a physical blow. I'm torn, sweetheart. All these relatives are coming specifically for this gathering. Your mother's already ordered catering. Caitlin's put so much work into organizing everything. And I put a year of planning into my wedding, I countered, tears now flowing freely. Dad, this is my wedding day. I know. Let me talk to your mother and Caitlin. Maybe we can work something out. But the following days brought no resolution. My mother was evasive on the phone, speaking about both events as if they held equal importance. I don't understand why you're making this so difficult, she said during one particularly frustrating conversation. Family comes first, Leah. These relatives have already bought plane tickets. Based on lies Caitlin told them. I practically shouted. Did you know she told everyone our wedding was the weekend after? I'm sure that was just a miscommunication, my mother said dismissively. Regardless, the plans are set now. Maybe you and Ryan could consider moving your date? June can be so unpredictable weather-wise anyway. The suggestion that I should reschedule my entire wedding with less than 6 weeks' notice left me speechless. When I found my voice again, I asked the question I'd been dreading. Are you and Dad even planning to come to my wedding? My mother's sigh spoke volumes. We're trying to figure out how to make both events work. Your father might be able to drive down for the ceremony and back for the family gathering, but I really need to be here to host. The casual way she dismissed one of the most important days of my life shattered something in me. After ending the call, I broke down in Ryan's arms, the full weight of my family's betrayal finally hitting home. Maybe we should postpone, I sobbed. Everything's ruined anyway. Ryan held me tightly but shook his head. This is exactly what your sister wants. We're not letting her win, not this time. With his encouragement, I made one last attempt at reconciliation. Instead of more phone calls that could be evaded or manipulated, I drove the 8 hours to Portland the following weekend, determined to have a face-to-face conversation with my family. I arrived unannounced on Saturday morning, knowing they would all be home. The surprise on their faces when I appeared on the doorstep was almost worth the long drive. Leah. My mother recovered first. What are you doing here? Is everything okay? No, everything is not okay, I said firmly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. We need to talk. All of us. My father emerged from his study, looking both pleased and concerned to see me. Caitlin came downstairs last, her expression carefully neutral when she spotted me, though I caught the momentary flash of annoyance. In the living room, with all three of them seated across from me, I laid out everything, the pattern of sabotage throughout the wedding planning, the deliberate scheduling of a competing event, and the lies told to extended family members about the wedding date. I have email confirmations from the venue dated last October, I said, placing printouts on the coffee table. The save the dates went out in January. Caitlin has known the exact date of my wedding for over 8 months, yet she deliberately scheduled this reunion for the same day. My father looked genuinely disturbed, while my mother shifted uncomfortably. Caitlin, however, maintained her composure. I think you're blowing this way out of proportion, she said calmly. Yes, I organized a family gathering on that weekend, but only because several relatives mentioned wanting to see you while they were in town for your wedding. When I realized there was confusion about the dates, it was too late, people had already made travel arrangements. What confusion? I challenged. There was never any confusion. You deliberately misled people. For a moment, the facade cracked. Caitlin's eyes narrowed, her voice dropping to a cold tone I recognized from childhood confrontations. You've always had Dad wrapped around your finger with your precious art and your sensitive feelings, she hissed. Poor Leah, always needing special attention. Some of us actually had to work for approval instead of crying until we got our way. The naked jealousy in her voice stunned the room into silence. My father looked between us, his expression pained. Caitlin, that's not fair, he began, but my sister cut him off. Not fair? What's not fair is how you always treated her like she was special. Leah sees the world differently, she mimicked. While I was working myself to exhaustion to make you proud, all she had to do was splash some paint on paper. The conversation deteriorated from there, years of resentment pouring out from Caitlin while my mother tried ineffectually to mediate. My father sat in stunned silence, perhaps truly seeing the dynamic between his daughters for the first time. When the shouting subsided, I turned to my parents, emotionally exhausted but determined to get a clear answer. I'm getting married on June 15th. Will you be there? My mother looked to my father, who took a deep breath before responding. Leah, I'm so sorry, but I think I need to be here. With most of the family coming to the house, I can't just leave your mother to handle everything. Despite having braced myself for this answer, the finality of it cut deep. I see. I stood up, gathering my bag. Then I guess there's nothing left to say. My mother followed me to the door, suggesting once more that I consider changing my date. Just push it back 2 weeks. We'll all come then, I promise. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she would never understand the magnitude of what was happening. In her world, accommodating Caitlin's machinations was simply easier than standing up to them. The wedding is happening on June 15th, I said quietly. With or without my family. The drive back to California was a blur of tears and heartache, but also, surprisingly, relief. The constant hope that my family might change, that Caitlin might somehow transform into the loving sister I'd always wanted, had been exhausting. Letting go of that hope felt like putting down a heavy burden I'd carried for decades. June 15th dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect California day wedding planners dream about. In the bridal suite of our venue, Jessica helped arrange my hair while I tried to focus on the positives. I was marrying the love of my life, surrounded by friends who had become family. The vintage-inspired dress that had taken months to find fit perfectly. The venue was decorated exactly as we'd envisioned, with wildflowers and soft lighting creating the intimate atmosphere we wanted. Yet the absence of my family cast a shadow I couldn't quite shake. I had received no further communication from my parents since that confrontation in Portland. While I hadn't really expected them to change their minds, the finality of their choice was still painful. As Jessica finished the last touches on my hair, my phone buzzed with a text message. My heart leapt, perhaps my father had reconsidered after all. But the message crushed that hope immediately. Leah, I'm sorry but we won't be able to make it today. Your mother needs my support with the family gathering. I love you and wish you all the happiness in the world. Dad. Reading those words, the official confirmation that my father had chosen Caitlin's manipulation over my wedding day, I felt something break inside me. The tears I'd been holding back all morning came in a flood, threatening to ruin the makeup Jessica had carefully applied. He's not coming, I choked out, showing her the message. None of them are coming. Jessica wrapped her arms around me, careful not to disturb my hair or dress. I'm so sorry, Leah. But listen to me, today is still your day. Don't let them take that from you. I nodded, trying to compose myself, but the thought of walking down the aisle alone suddenly seemed unbearable. For all my talk of independence and creating my own family with Ryan, I had held on to the hope that my father would fulfill this traditional role. Maybe we should just cancel the ceremony, I said quietly. Just do a quick thing at the courthouse later and tell everyone to enjoy the reception. Jessica looked alarmed. No way. You've been planning this for a year. Ryan is out there waiting for you. This is happening. As we argued gently about the best course of action, a knock came at the door. Jessica opened it to reveal Ryan, breaking the tradition of not seeing the bride before the ceremony. I know I'm not supposed to be here, he said, eyes only for me despite Jessica's protests. But I felt like something was wrong. One look at my tear-streaked face confirmed his intuition. He crossed the room and took my hands in his. Your dad? He asked simply. I nodded, unable to speak through fresh tears. Ryan pulled me close, wedding superstitions forgotten. I'm so sorry, Leah. What do you want to do? Whatever you decide, I'm with you. If you want to postpone, change plans completely, elope to Vegas, just tell me. This is our day, not anyone else's. His unwavering support gave me strength. As we stood there, another knock came at the door. This time, Jessica opened it to reveal Ryan's father, Kenneth. Sorry to interrupt, he said, taking in the scene with concern. I was just checking if everything's on schedule. Ryan explained the situation briefly. Kenneth's kind face registered first shock, then determination. Leah, he said, approaching us. I know I'm not your father, and I would never presume to replace him. But if you'd allow me the honor, I would be proud to walk you down the aisle today. The offer, so genuine and unexpected, brought fresh tears, but of a different kind. You'd do that for me? I managed to ask. Of course, he said simply. Your family now. As Ryan excused himself to return to his groomsmen, promising everything would be okay, another surprise awaited. My cousin Amy arrived at the bridal suite, slightly out of breath. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was awful coming down from San Francisco. I stared at her in confusion. You're here? But the family gathering is a complete sham, Amy finished firmly. When I realized what Caitlin was doing, I called around to other relatives. Several of us decided your wedding was where we should be. She stepped aside to reveal 3 more cousins, my father's sister Aunt Patricia, and even my grandmother, all dressed for a wedding and smiling supportively. But how did you know the real date? I asked, bewildered. Your invitations, silly, Amy laughed. We all received them months ago. When Caitlin started calling about this sudden reunion on the same day, it wasn't hard to figure out what was happening. Aunt Patricia stepped forward to embrace me. Your father may have made his choice today, but that doesn't mean all of us agree with it. Some family ties are stronger than manipulation. With my makeup hastily repaired and my spirits significantly lifted, the ceremony began only slightly behind schedule. Kenneth offered his arm with a warm smile, and as the music started, we began the walk I had imagined so differently for so long. The barn doors opened to reveal our gathered loved ones, Ryan's extensive family, our circle of devoted friends, and the rebel faction of my own family who had chosen truth over convenience. At the end of the aisle stood Ryan, his face lighting up at the sight of me in a way that made all the pain of the day recede. The ceremony itself was everything we had hoped for, personal, meaningful, and focused on the life we were building together rather than the past we were leaving behind. We exchanged vows we had written ourselves, promising honesty, support, and the freedom to grow both individually and as a couple. I choose you as my family, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion behind the words. Today and every day forward. At the reception, surrounded by genuine love and celebration, I found myself actually enjoying the day rather than mourning who wasn't there. Amy and my other cousins shared stories I'd never heard about my father's own wedding day jitters. Aunt Patricia showed me old family photos she'd brought along, including several of me as a child that I'd never seen. Your father was so proud of you, she told me quietly during a private moment. I don't know what's happened to him these past years, but the brother I knew would never have missed this day. As the evening progressed, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my mother. Caitlin told us some of the relatives canceled at the last minute. Are they with you? The message contained no congratulations, no well wishes, just concern about the attendance at their competing event. I showed it to Ryan, who shook his head in disbelief. You don't have to respond right now, he advised. This is our wedding night. But before I could decide, another message came through, this one from my father. Just heard from Patricia that she's at your wedding with Mom and the Michigan cousins. Leah, has Caitlin been lying to us about the dates? Call me. The realization that my father was finally beginning to see through Caitlin's manipulations brought mixed emotions. On one hand, validation that I wasn't crazy, that the dynamic I'd described for years was real. On the other, heartbreak that it had taken missing my wedding day for him to recognize the truth. I handed the phone to Ryan. I can't deal with this tonight. Can you put it somewhere I won't see it until tomorrow? He pocketed it immediately. Consider it done. Now, I believe my wife owes me a dance. As we moved across the floor to our favorite song, I rested my head on Ryan's shoulder and felt a profound sense of peace. The day hadn't gone as originally planned, but perhaps it had gone exactly as it needed to. The people surrounding us on the dance floor were there by choice, not obligation, and maybe that was the better foundation for beginning our married life. The week following our wedding was a blur of contradicting emotions. Ryan and I spent 5 blissful days at a coastal bed and breakfast, deliberately disconnecting from phones and outside concerns. The gentle rhythm of waves against the shore and long walks on nearly empty beaches created a cocoon of peace around us. In those quiet moments, with Ryan's hand in mine and the infinite horizon before us, the pain of my family's absence began to recede. Reality returned as we drove back to our apartment in Los Angeles. When I finally turned my phone back on, a flood of messages appeared, most from my father, growing increasingly urgent over the days. The most recent, sent just hours earlier, read simply, "Please call me, Leah. We need to talk." Ryan noticed my expression darken as I scrolled through the notifications. "You don't have to respond right away," he reminded me. "Or at all, if that's what you need." I considered this as we unpacked, putting away souvenirs and wedding gifts. The hurt was still raw, but beneath it lay exhaustion with the whole dynamic. For years, I had been the one to maintain connections, to forgive transgressions, to make peace for the sake of family harmony. For once, I decided to prioritize my own healing. "I'll call him," I finally told Ryan that evening. "But not today. And on my terms." 2 weeks after returning from our honeymoon, I arranged to meet my father at a cafe in Sacramento, neutral territory, halfway between our homes. I arrived early, selecting a quiet corner table with good sight lines to the door. When my father walked in, the physical change in him shocked me. He seemed to have aged years in the month since I'd last seen him, his shoulders slumped and gray hair more prominent than I remembered. His eyes lit up briefly upon seeing me, then dimmed with what looked like shame as he approached. "Leah," he said, his voice catching slightly. "Thank you for meeting me." The conversation started awkwardly, with surface-level questions about the wedding and honeymoon. I answered politely but without elaboration, waiting for him to address the real reason for our meeting. Finally, after his coffee had grown cold, he set the cup down with a decisive movement. "I've failed you," he said plainly. "Not just at your wedding, but for years. I've been trying to figure out when it all went wrong, and I think it started long before you left for college." Over the next hour, my father laid bare the dysfunction that had defined our family for decades. He had seen the jealousy in Caitlin from an early age but had convinced himself it was normal sibling rivalry that would resolve with time. When it didn't, he had taken the path of least resistance, placating Caitlin while encouraging me to be understanding of my more sensitive sister. "Your mother and I thought we were keeping the peace," he explained. "But we were actually enabling behavior that got worse over time. By not addressing it directly, we let Caitlin believe her actions were acceptable." The missing piece clicked into place when he described what happened after I left their house that day in May. "Amy called your grandmother, who called your aunts, and suddenly the family reunion started falling apart. People were asking questions I couldn't answer. Why was the gathering scheduled on your wedding day? Why had they been told your wedding was the following weekend?" His voice broke as he continued. "Caitlin had explanations for everything, of course. Miscommunications, innocent mistakes. But when 6 different relatives report the same mistake, it becomes a pattern." I started looking back at other incidents over the years, times when you and Caitlin were at odds, and I realized how often I'd dismissed your perspective without really considering it. Tears gathered in his eyes. "The morning of your wedding, I was still planning to drive down for the ceremony. Caitlin had a meltdown, claimed she was having panic attacks at the thought of handling the gathering alone. Your mother insisted I couldn't leave. I made the wrong choice, Leah. I can never get that day back for you, and I will regret it for the rest of my life." The raw honesty in his voice penetrated the protective wall I'd built around my heart. I had come prepared for excuses or partial acknowledgments, not this complete acceptance of responsibility. "I appreciate you saying that," I said carefully. "But I need you to understand that this isn't something I can just move past with a single conversation. This has been my entire life, Dad. Years of having my experiences invalidated, my accomplishments diminished, my character questioned, all while watching Caitlin receive endless accommodation and benefit of the doubt." He nodded, eyes downcast. "I know. I don't expect forgiveness, certainly not right away. But I want to try to rebuild something, if you're willing." On your terms, at your pace. What about Mom? And Caitlin? I asked. His expression tightened. Your mother and I are working through things. She's still struggling to accept the extent of what happened. As for Caitlin, he sighed deeply, she refused to join us for family counseling. Claims the therapist would be biased against her from the start. The mention of therapy surprised me. You're seeing a therapist? Twice a week, he confirmed. Individually and with your mother when she'll go. It's been eye-opening. Painful, but necessary. We talked for nearly 3 hours, covering painful memories and missed opportunities for connection. By the time we said goodbye, tentative plans had been made for him to visit Los Angeles the following month, alone, without my mother or sister. The meeting had not magically healed the rift between us, but it had created a small bridge across it. True to his word, my father came to visit 4 weeks later. Ryan and I showed him our favorite spots in the city, and he took genuine interest in my latest art projects. The conversation flowed more easily than it had in years, though we carefully avoided certain topics. Before leaving, he handed me a small package. I found these while going through old photo albums, he explained. Inside were dozens of photographs he had taken of my artwork throughout childhood, pieces I had forgotten creating, captured through his lens with obvious pride. The gift acknowledged our shared history in a way words couldn't express. Over the following months, my relationship with my father slowly strengthened. We established a regular Sunday phone call, and he made the effort to visit California every other month. My mother eventually joined one of these visits, her apology less comprehensive than my father's but sincere in its way. I always thought I was being fair, she explained during a tense but productive dinner. I didn't see how differently I treated you and your sister. I'm trying to understand that now. Caitlin remained the wild card in the family equation. She refused any acknowledgement of wrongdoing, positioning herself as the victim of a family conspiracy against her. When confronted with evidence of her deliberate sabotage, she would either deny it outright or twist the narrative to justify her actions. I was just trying to create a special family moment, she insisted regarding the competing event. Everyone's making me out to be some kind of villain because I wanted our relatives to spend time together. I made the difficult decision to maintain strict boundaries with my sister. Our communication became limited to group family texts and occasional carefully managed holiday interactions. The distance was necessary for my mental health, though my parents struggled to accept it. She's still your sister, my mother would say. Family is family. Family should build you up, not tear you down, I would counter, echoing Ryan's words from early in our relationship. On our first anniversary, Ryan and I hosted a small dinner party at our apartment. My parents attended, along with Ryan's family and our closest friends. Caitlin was not invited, a decision that caused tension but one I stood firm on. The evening was relaxed and joyful in a way family gatherings had never been in my experience. Later that month, I received unexpected news. My Family Fragments series, a collection of mixed media pieces exploring family dynamics through abstract representations, had been accepted for exhibition at a prestigious gallery. The work, born from my processing of decades of family dysfunction, resonated with viewers in a way that surprised even me. At the opening, surrounded by friends and supporters, I spotted my father quietly studying one particularly powerful piece depicting fractured communication. The tears in his eyes told me he recognized himself in the work. When our eyes met across the room, his nod conveyed understanding and respect I had sought for years. 2 years after our wedding, Ryan and I shared news that brought a new dimension to our family narrative. We were expecting a child. The pregnancy prompted deep reflection on the patterns I wanted to break and the healthy boundaries I needed to maintain. When our daughter Lily was born, holding her small, perfect form in my arms crystallized everything I had learned through years of struggle. I would protect her from toxic dynamics. I would validate her experiences and emotions. I would celebrate her uniqueness rather than comparing her to others. Most importantly, I would give her the security of unconditional love that I had never fully known. My parents embraced their role as grandparents with genuine joy. My father, especially, seemed determined to get this relationship right from the beginning. Watching him gently rock Lily, pointing out shapes and colors with the same patience he had once shown me with photography, I felt the healing power of second chances. Caitlin's response to Lily's birth was predictably complex. Her congratulatory message came with subtle digs about how motherhood would finally give me something real to focus on besides art. When she visited, her interactions with the baby seemed performative rather than genuine. I maintained vigilant boundaries while allowing her the opportunity to be part of Lily's life in a limited, supervised capacity. Looking back now, for years after that wedding day that nearly broke me, I realize that sometimes the families we create matter more than the ones we're born into. Ryan, Lily, and our circle of chosen family provide the acceptance and support I spent decades seeking from my sister and parents. My relationship with my father has healed significantly, built on honest communication and respect for boundaries. My mother tries in her way, though old habits sometimes resurface. Caitlin remains Caitlin, capable of charm and warmth when it serves her, but fundamentally unchanged in her need to compete and control. The difference now is that I no longer seek her approval or fear her sabotage. I found strength in setting boundaries and peace in accepting what cannot be changed. Not every family story has a perfect resolution where all conflicts are resolved and all relationships restored. Sometimes, healing comes from acknowledging that reality and building a life rich with authentic connections despite those limitations. If you're watching this and struggling with toxic family dynamics, know that your worth isn't determined by those who should love you but don't know how. Creating distance isn't failure, sometimes it's the most self-respecting choice you can make. Have you had to set boundaries with family members for your own well-being? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and growth. Remember, the family that matters most might be the one you build rather than the one you're born into. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength and peace on your own path to healing.